Hello, I'm Kathy Smith. I'm the director of the Historical Society of Lee Summit History Museum, and this is Lee Summit Reflections. Today we're going to be talking about the center of the home back in 1939. The reason why we developed this exhibit is because we know that the kitchen is always the heart of the home. So if you can just imagine a family here in Lee Summit, a small community back in those days, just a few thousand people, coming together in this small kitchen. This great table that we have belonged to the Davis family, and it's over 100 years old. And believe me, I'm sure it's seen many of those stories. We know that there were lots of tears shed at these tables, and lots of coffee was consumed, and lots of hugs and lots of kisses. This is kind of the basic kitchen, and we have a lot of great things that furnish this exhibit. This is a chair from that era, and then we have a wonderful refrigerator that was donated to us by the Hartley family. So this great refrigerator, even though it's small, it still accommodated the needs of a family back then. But the mom or the grandma, whoever owned this refrigerator, would have to go to the store probably every other day. But back then, downtown Lee Summit had a lot of grocery stores, and there were so many of them, each one would have their own favorite that they would go to. So sometimes you just pick up the phone, if you had a phone, and they would deliver the groceries. The box boy, that's what the delivery boy was called. He would deliver the groceries and put it in the refrigerator for you if you wanted him to. You can see how small the ice tray is. Very, just a few little compartments that would be used over and over again. And but this was a kind of a upscale model of an early refrigerator, and because it has a little fancy dial on it and so forth, and it weighs a lot. When we were moving it over here to the museum, the folks that moved it did comment on that. And then our great range that we have here, it's called the Detroit Jewel. They bake better. That was the slogan. And this was the top of the line range, and a lot of the kitchens had these. It's a gas-fired range, and has a great little oven, not that big though, so you can imagine if you're trying to get ready for Thanksgiving dinner, you wouldn't really have enough room for a very big turkey. Also, back then they had these little frying pans. This would be for eggs. And then my dad had a frying pan just like this for frying fish. This is a waffle iron. It goes over the gas range, and you put your batter in here and close this down. Of course, you have to monitor it. And this thing weighs a ton. So moms in those early kitchens really had a lot of heavy accoutrements to deal with, and put in a lot of work slaving over the hot stove. Maybe that's the era when that little term came into be. And almost all ranges had a bowl like this, and this was a waste bowl, or they would put bacon drippings in here because they recycled their bacon drippings back in those days. The complete kitchen always had a great coffee pot. This is an enamel coffee pot, and many of you might have remembered this in your grandma's kitchen or your mom's kitchen. Some of them were really big. This is kind of a moderate size, and these pots made a lot of coffee. Now, my grandmother had one. It was about this much taller. She put egg shells in her coffee for some unknown reason. So if some of you know why they would do that, please let me know, because I never did know that. I found that to be very unusual as a kid, to see my grandmother putting eggshells in there. When making really good light cakes, and a lot of women back then were fantastic bakers, they always used a flour sifter. So you'd put the flour and all the dry ingredients in and sift it through this into a big bowl, and then you could go ahead and add your wet ingredients and then make fantastic cakes and cookies and pies and things like that. Our great, beautiful crockery bowl that we have here was donated to the museum by Kay Ford, and I believe she told me this belonged to her great-grandmother, and her great-grandmother made a lot of bread in this bowl. So early kitchens had crockery bowls of all shapes and sizes. I remember a neighbor who, when I was only in the first grade, but I remember her baking cakes, and her name was Edith Gray. I can still remember her name. She'd put her bowl on her hip, and she'd beat that with her wooden spoon until the batter was all cooked. So I imagine a lot of those early grandmas and grandmas did the same thing in these types of bowls. We have a reamer here. This, you would take either a grapefruit or an orange or a lemon, and you would go back and forth like this, and it would get the juice out of it. So back in those days, they had a lot of fresh orange juice. They really didn't have much in the way of frozen orange juice. And then They didn't necessarily have electric can openers. They had this handy dandy can opener that you took the can, you popped your hand on it like that, and then this pointy deal went right in there, and then you would go around the can like that. We have a beautiful apron here, red and white apron that matches our kitchen, and it's all crocheted. And then there's a great little pot holder that goes with the apron. A lot of times the person in the household that crocheted also would make a pot holder for practicality purposes, or just to kind of make her range look really pretty. The rolling pin, these are super great. She didn't have marble, she had the wood, and this would roll out your dough, or roll out your cookie dough, or whatever it was. And of course there was an art to using this. If you pushed on it too hard, your dough would get really flat and it would be hard to get it up off of the paper that you were rolling it on. So these are really treasured in the household, and I'm not sure how old this one is, but we received it as a donation a very long time ago. And all of our great tins that we have here from that time period, maybe a little bit later model, but they would have had lots of tins up in their cupboards with crackers and popcorn and spices and coffee and so forth. And then if on the dining room table, or even maybe at a little kitchen table like this, they would have this cracker jar or cookie jar. And that was for special occasions, and they'd put fancy cookies in there when company was coming. And then the candle holders matched this, and they would put the tapered candle holders and then light those candles up for special guests. I wanted to thank you for coming and visiting our WPA kitchen. It's located in our new History Museum, which is at 220 Southwest Main in beautiful downtown Lee Summit. We're between Jerry's Bridal and the Bank of Lee Summit.